It is now Thursday, and we've just been back from shopping. It's very, very cold in the house. At the moment, I think it's 55 degrees. This is a very hard house it's not a big house, but it's hard to heat. Anyway, so much for, so much for my troubles and Constance's troubles. Anyway, I'll try to be indifferent to the cold weather. Which brings us to the subject of today's chapter of Little Essays Toward Truth, which is called Indifference. Now, I'm sure somebody out there knows exactly kind of what year Crowley wrote Little Essays Toward Truth. And to tell you the truth, right off the top of my head, I don't know the year that he wrote it, but it's obvious that it was pretty. It was after the Book of the Law and after the Vision and the Voice march across the Sahara with the Enochian Aethers and all of that. But you can really see where Crowley is starting to put things together in his own mind about how Thelema is relative, or how Thelema can be prepared to, or vis-a-vis, Buddhism and Taoism and the Tao. And it's starting really to come together about this Golden Dawn climb up the tree of life and the various trances that are associated with existing, perhaps even old aeon religious movements and religious thought. He's on Indifference because he's always talking about the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, and using that in a way, or using that language to explain Thelema's new twist on things. And already several times he's mentioned the First Noble Truth and the Third Noble Truth. So just before I start this one, I'm going to review just briefly what those Four Noble Truths are. And the first one, Crowley attempts to do the Pali, or whatever the language is, sabapi dukkam, or life is suffering. That's the first noble truth. But the word dukkha, from which that statement is drawn, it means suffering, like, oh yeah, I'm bummed. Okay, suffering, what we think of. But it includes all things that are transient, or things that are impermanent or conditional. So all states of transience, or all states of that are conditional. Okay, life is suffering. The second noble truth was that attachment is the cause of that suffering. And the third noble cause, or the third noble truth, is the cure to suffering is freeing yourself from attachment. And the fourth noble truth is that the eightfold path, that's sort of the next chapter in the doctrine, will show you the way how to end suffering. So Crowley's going to be making reference to that in this chapter, which is one of my favorites. Do you know why it's one of my favorites? Because I don't care. I'm indifferent. Indifference, the state of mind which is characterized by indifference, is commonly called trance, but the misnomer is unfortunate. It is, in fact, in a sense, the precise contrary of a trance, for trance usually implies samadhi, and this state specifically excludes any such occurrence. That implies a uniting, and this is a will disassociation. Yet there is nothing herein to suggest necessarily any practice of the Black Brothers, for it is not, properly speaking, an attainment, but rather a convenient attitude. And it is one of very greatest importance to us, and greatest practical importance to use. One could not remain indefinitely in any samadhi. At the same time, it is proper to fulfill the intervals with gusts of positive work in such a way as to leave oneself as free as possible to take the next step. One should therefore cultivate a habit of mind which is not bound by any form of desire. The state of indifference is thus a form of that silence which is defense and protection, and is cognate with the third noble truth of Buddhism: sorrow can cease. Okay. Or as Crowley says, the third noble truth of Buddhism, sorrow's ceasing. The general idea of the state is that the mind should react automatically to each and every impression. It does not matter whether the event be yea or nay. Blavatsky observes that the feeling is at least tinged with disgust. But this is an error. Such a state is imperfect. There should, on the contrary, be a quiet, definite joy, not in the impression itself, but being indifferent to it. This joy springs doubtless from the sense of power involved, but that is again an imperfection. One should rather rejoice in the cognizance of the ultimate truth that, quote, existence is pure joy. Not any feeling more immediate. It is to be observed that the attainment and maintenance of this state depends to a great extent on the mastery of several trances. For instance, one must not be convinced of the first noble truth by the trance of sorrow, or it would not be logical to be indifferent to all things. There might be an absence of this perception of sabe dukkam, life is sorrow, all is sorrow, some impression which actually lead to some state free from sorrow, and this is not the case. Freedom from sorrow depends on freedom from impression. Yet it would not be fair to say that this state of indifference is akin to that dullness which succeeds the acute spasm of sorrow. It is not the anesthesia of a nerve worn out by excess pain. There is never any place in the curriculum of a magician for passivity. Of course, here we accept what may be called the active or will passivity described in Liber 65. That's the passivity of the alternating state of yearning for the angel and waiting passively for the angel. Indifference is to be an instantly active condition. One may compare it with the ease of a skilled fencer who meets and deflects every possible attack of his antagonist with equal vigor, unconscious of his acts, because he's trained his eye, wrist, and even the blade to think for themselves. Thus, indifference is the spiritual form of automatic consciousness of the adept. It resides in Yesod, the place of the fortress on the frontier of the abyss, as is described in Liber 418. That's the vision in the voice, in the 11th Aether. This indifference, being a habit of normal mind, is easier to attain than any true somatic state and involves less technical ability. This is particularly the case because, as noted above, the trance of sorrow has been an almost necessary preliminary to the proper understanding of what it implies. The method, therefore, of acquiring... Now, I'm going to read this twice because it's one of those parenthetical things that you sometimes get lost in the parenthetical and forget what the statement says. The method, therefore, of acquiring indifference is simple. It is, in effect, the way of the Tao. Now, I'll repeat that again, but I'll stick in the words in parentheses. The method, therefore, of acquiring, the word is to be preferred to attaining. Indifference is simple. It is, in effect, the way of the Tao. The following sorites may prove useful to the aspirant. A sority or a sorite, I don't know how to pronounce it, is it's easier to give an example. That big dog is mean. All big dogs are mean. Or all mean things are dogs. That's more like it. Here's the example. Existence is only to be understood as a continuum. All parts of existence are therefore ultimately equivalent, each being equally necessary to complete the whole. Each event is thus to be received with equal honor, and the reaction to it made with equal indifference. I'm going to repeat that. Existence is only to be understood as a continuum. All parts of existence are therefore ultimately equivalent, each being equally necessary to complete the whole. Each event is thus to be received with equal honor, and the reaction to it made with equal indifference. To offer a practical parallel, suppose one is to receive £1,000 money, okay, and this amount is to be paid over in diverse coins with IOUs for various sums. Since one knows in advance that the balance in one's favor is £1,000, one does not get excited on the appearance of any particular item, but it goes on steadily counting, making the right reaction, whether a plus or a minus item is at issue, with perfect calm and accuracy. Each entry in the amount may be different, but one's mental attitude is invariable. The common error of the unphilosophical mind is indeed due to ignorance of the true nature of the soul. One is apt to suppose that each event as it occurs may be good or bad, may indicate that one is winning or losing. But as soon as one is certain that the issue is factitious, that's factitious or artificially created, that it has been determined beforehand, it becomes absurd to be affected by one incident in the illusionary process which nature uses symbolically to express the fatality of truth rather than by any other. So, if you already know you're going to get $1,000, you're going to get it in 50 installments, and some of those installments are going to be partially taken back and partially added. You don't care. You're confident that you're going to get the $1,000, so why agonize over how it all eventually comes? It is interesting to note that this method of acquiring indifference is quite independent of any experience of the trance of sorrow. It is a simple and normal consideration based strictly on thelemic premises. It is thus most highly to be recommended. The methods of the dead Aeon of Osiris were in fact attended with no inconsiderable danger. The question of separateness from the universe is critical, for one thing. For another, it is a mistake to be dependent upon such a theory as that implied in the First Noble Truth in its outer aspects. We'll see about there. Let's see. It is altogether better to adopt the purely intellectual attitude and anchor it subsequently in neshama, the soul intuition, in the usual way by the method of contradiction or equating the opposites, such as described in Conks om Pox and in the best essays on the Holy Kabbalah. It is apt, moreover, to lead to several types of error It is apt, moreover, to lead to several types of error to regard indifference as a state inferior to samadhi. In particular, one may tend to think of it as passive, as imperfect, as interregnum. It's like regulation. It's like government. It's like between two governments. It's a period of no government between administrations or dynasties. Okay. In particular, one may tend to think of it as passive, as imperfect, as interregnum, whereas it should be considered as a state of peace with victory. It need only be added, in conclusion, that indifference is not perfect until it is entered into full possession of at least one samadhic trait, automatism. As long as there remains any need of conscious effort in dealing with any impression, any need to remember the process by which the state is reached, or even any need of conscious interference with or cognizance of the purely spontaneous elastic reflex reaction, the aspirant to the summum bonum, true wisdom and perfect happiness, has not adequately acquired the habit of indifference. So much for indifference. I hope you enjoyed. Oh, I don't care. Anyway, as I mentioned yesterday, Constance and I are doing a little what we call Salon Magique here in Sacramento on Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock. If you want more information on that, just leave me a message here on the Facebook message, and we'll give you the details and directions. So until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.